Okay, good morning everyone. It's been a little while since we were learning Hilchos Tzitzis, so I want to have a way to segue us back into Hilchos Tzitzis by sharing with you a very interesting question on a stira between Parshas Noach and Parshas Lecha, and this will get us right back into the subject. We know we just read this past week, Vayikach Sheim v'Japheth es hasimla. Shem and Japheth, they saw their father had planted the vineyard, and he drank, and he became uncovered, and he was lying in a state of degradation. So they took the cloak, they put the cloak on their shoulders, they walked backward, they covered their father's shame, and even when they got close, Rashi explains, they were facing the other way. They would not look at their father's shame. Speaking about shame, the question is, who did this mitzvah? Because at first it says, Vayikach Shem v'Japheth, but it should say, Vayikchu, they took. Why does it say Vayikach? Right, it's like a stira minei ublei. It says Vayasimu, they placed it. So why doesn't it say Vayikchu? Says Rashi, incisive vayikchu ela vayikach limed al shem shenesametz b'mitzvah yoiser meyafes. We learn from here that Shem strengthened in the mitzvah more than Japheth. Lekach zachu banav letalis shel tzitzis. Therefore, his children merited the talis of tzitzis. In other words, why do we wear tzitzis today? We wear tzitzis in order as a reward. It was given as a gift to the Semites, to the descendants of Sheim, because Sheim, he exerted himself in the mitzvah more than Japheth. So you'll ask, did Japheth get any reward? Yeah, in the time of Machon Maggid Harakiah, all the slain in the war of Gold of MMH will be buried in the merit of Japheth covering his father's shame. Okay, so you got it? Shame, I'm using the word shame in two different contexts, but shame was nesametz in the mitzvah more, he exerted himself more, therefore his descendants were zoiche to tzitzis. Japheth was a little bit lackadaisical, so he lagged behind, so instead of getting tzitzis, his descendants were zoiche to burial. I believe Rav Soloveitchik explains that the understanding that Shem was exerted himself more is Shem was doing the mitzvah to really protect the dignity and the kavod of his father, and to protect his father's tselem Elokim, his father's divine element. Therefore, we're rewarded with a divine mitzvah. Japheth, on the other hand, was just trying to cover his body. So therefore, his descendants were rewarded just that their bodies are covered and buried. Okay? In any event, let's just think about what happened for a moment. Shem did one little thing. He had one challenge in life. He saw his father in a state of shame, and he decided to cover him. And since that day, millions and millions and millions of Jews are wearing tzitzis because of one little tiny thing that Shem did. I mean, does that even make sense? What did he do already? Okay, he covered his father. So what, he covered his father? That's such a big deal? He just did one little thing, and I'm wearing tzitzis, he's wearing tzitzis, you're wearing tzitzis, and we do it every single day, and our children are going to do it, and our grandchildren. How do we understand that one person did a tiny little thing, and they got such a great reward? So this is an illustration of a very important concept of the Chovos HaLevavos, who says, never underestimate any good deed you do for the sake of Hashem, even with a good word, or even with a good glance, right? Why? Ki hama'at mimecha rav etzlai. A little thing from you is big for him. A little thing for you, a little tiny thing. In other words, you think it's a small thing, a little thing on your part is very big in the eyes of Hashem. If you take one step for His honor, you make one move for His honor, one word for His honor, it's a big zach for Hashem. In the eyes of Hashem, it looms very large. Never underestimate a small little effort you make for the sake of Hashem. You make an effort to do something a little better, to come 5 seconds earlier, to focus an ounce, a little bit more, that's very valuable in the eyes of Hashem. Okay, now, what's the question on this? Really? That's why we're Zoicha to Tzitzis. Doesn't the Gemara in Saita on Daf Yud Zayin say that why are we Zoicha to Tzitzis? Because in this week's Parsha, Avraham Avinu goes to war against the 4 kings. The 4 kings defeat the 5 kings, and Avraham fights the 4 kings, and he is awarded all the spoils of the war. And Avraham Avinu says, no, I'm not going to take a shoelace, I'm not going to take a shoe strap. So Chazal say, in the merit that Avraham said, he was zoicha to 2 mitzvahs. One mitzvah, the string of tcheles, and the strap of tefillin. So it's a stira. Why are we zoicha to tzitzis? Is it because of the act of Sheim, or is it because of the act of Avraham? You got the kasha? Right? It's a stira in Chazal. Parshas Noach, Chazal say that because Sheim strengthened, exerted himself more in covering his father, his descendants were zoicha and tzitzis. And the Gemara in Soita says that it's in the merit that Avraham said, I'm not going to take a shoe lace, I'm not going to take a shoe strap. So Rabbi Yehuda Mizrahi, the Re'im, says that we understand it as follows. When Sheim did the mitzvah, we're zoicha to the white strings. And when Avraham Avinu did the mitzvah, we were zoicha to tcheles. That's why the Gemara emphasizes that in the merit of what Avraham Avinu did, he was zoicha to chut shel tcheles. He was zoicha to chut shel tcheles. Interesting. So I have a sefer called Darkei Shalom. Darkei Shalom was from Rav Shalom Schechter. You ever hear the yeshiva? Rav Shalom Schechter's yeshiva? So he has a sefer in the style of Brisker Torah, and he offers another approach to answer this question. In whose merit are we zoicha to tzitzis? In the merit of Sheim or in the merit of Avraham Avinu? He says you could clear the following chakira. In the mitzvah of tzitzis, is the whole mitzvah just the strings? Only the strings are the Schechter shel mitzvah, and the beged is just the circumstance that allows us to fulfill the mitzvah? For example, let's say you put a roof on your house. Let's say you have a porch. Like when I bought my house, they don't want to give me a mortgage because maybe this is too much information, but because the door from the second floor opened up to an area on top of a garage that was grandfathered in from the original owner, because back in the day, in the 1960s, there was no such thing as safety, like in other countries. You know, like in other countries, there's no such thing as there's no requirement of railings, you know, but you go there, you say, well, what's going on here? Somebody could fall down, in Chanami. But in America, there are statutes. You can't, so they won't give you a mortgage if there's a door that leads to an area that doesn't have so I had to call the contractor and make a railing just to get a mortgage. But actually I'm being mekayim a mitzvah, a makkah. So now the question is, the guy can't be my shliach to make a makkah. So do I have to bang in the nails or, okay, it's a different, but would you say when you make a ma'akah, or in the Yeshiva Shevet it's called a maika, yeah? Is the porch the Schechter shel mitzvah or just the fence? So the fence is the mitzvah. The porch is just a circumstance. Or here's a better thing. Is your doorpost the Schechter shel mitzvah? You put up a mezuzah on the doorpost. Is your doorpost the Schechter shel mitzvah? Of course not. The Schechter shel mitzvah is the mezuzah. The doorpost is only the circumstance that obligates you in the mitzvah mezuzah. So just like everybody would say the doorpost is not a Schechter shel mitzvah, is the 4-cornered garment a Schechter shel mitzvah? Or is it just like your porch or your doorpost? I would have said it's not a Schechter shel mitzvah. Is your beged, is your beged a Schechter shel mitzvah? The garment that you're wearing, is it a Schechter shel mitzvah?
Can we see based on how we disregard or we throw it out afterwards, when one goes to Shemus while the other one could go?
The answer is neither goes to Shemus. What do you do with a Schechter shel mitzvah when you're finished with it? You could throw in the garbage.
The strings?
Technically you could. just, the Ramah says, we dispose of it in a respectful way. But it's not shemus. It's just, they're nizrakim, but we dispose of it in a respectful way. In other words, if you have a strap of tefillin, you have to bury it. Okay? If you have tzitzis strings, you do not have to bury it. You could dispose of it, but we do it in a respectful way. But the question then is, are you allowed to dispose of the garment of tzitzis in a disrespectful way? Could you cut off the strings, put the strings in a double bag, but the garment throw in the garbage? That's really the question. Is the garment a chefza shel mitzvah? Or do we say, no, the entire garment and string become the chefza shel mitzvah? Good question, right? Well, let me ask you a question. Did you ever hear, did they ever market this? Having beautiful doorposts because of Zek Keli V'Anveyo. You know, you go to Judaica Plus. What's the store on Central? Judaica Plus. And they have now, I don't know, the Lucite edition of the doorpost, right? Now, who in their right mind invented everything should be Lucite? I understand Lucite matzah boxes, but Lucite Berchas Hamazons? What is that? It's not their fault, it's your fault. You buy it. Why in the world would you buy a Lucite Berchas Hamazons? You have to Anyway, but the Lucite edition, do they have Lucite doorposts or gold-plated doorposts? Of course not. There's no inyan of Zek Keli Ve'anvehu on the circumstances that allow you to perform a mitzvah. Is there an inyan to have a nice talis itself? Not the strings, the garment. Does Zek Keli Ve'anvehu say you should have a nice garment? Or you could have a shmata of a garment as long as you have nice strings. So Rashi in Bava Kama on Daf Tes, who's learning Bava Kama in Darche? Because we have Chashva Darche Bachram, they're learning Bava Kama. In Bava Kama Daf Tes, it says Hider mitzvah ad shlish, Zek Keli Vanveu, Hisna Levan mitzvahs, Asei Lecha Sefer Torah Noah, Lulav Noah, Talis Noah. So you say, well, Talis Noah, maybe it means the strings. Tzitzis Noah, Mavur Midvarav, Degam al Guf HaTalis, Ika Dina Dehidr Mitzvah. Now, it's Pashat, Rav Shalom Schechter says, Hidr Mitzvah is only shaykh on the Chefza Shel Mitzvah, not on something that is the circumstance we mekayim the mitzvah. Now, if this is correct, that the beged and the talis are part of the mitzvah, meaning, it's not that the garment is the circumstance and the tzitzis is a chefza shel mitzvah, but the whole thing is the chefza shel mitzvah. V'ha mitzvah shel tzitzis miskayemes al yidei shneim hatalis v'chutei hatzitzis biyachad. Then miyushav heitiv kushas hareim. We could answer the question on the Mizrahi. The Mizrahi asked, in whose merit are we zoicha to tzitzis? In the merit of Sheim or in the merit of Avraham? So the Re'im, the Mizrahi said, in the merit of Sheim, we're zoicha to the white strings, and the merit of Avraham, we're zoicha to the blue strings. But now we could say better, in the merit of Avraham, in the merit of Sheim, we're zoicha to the garment, which is very good, because what did Sheim do? Sheim, covered his father with a string. That wouldn't have done anything. He covered his father with a garment, with a beged, with a kisoy. So in the merit of covering his father with a kisoy, we are zoicha to what? The garment of tzitzis, which is also part of the chefza shel mitzvah. But comes Avraham Avinu and he says, "Ve'im nichut v'yatzrechnal." I'm not going to take a string. So in the merit of Avraham, we're zoicha to the string, which comes out much better in terms of parallel to what Sheim did and what Avraham did. Sheim used the garment, Avraham used the string, as opposed to the way the Mizrahi says it. Sheim used the garment, so he's zoicha to the white, and Avraham said a string, so he's zoicha to tcheles. V'zeh zachu, even though, by the way, the lashon of the Gemara in Saita that says Avraham was zoicha to tcheles, that's more mashma like the Mizrahi. He says, "V'leka shum stira bein Rashi didan l'sugya d'saita." The sugya d'saita ari b'chutei hatzitzis uchalishna the Gemara sham zachu banav b'kasav chut shel tcheles v'zeh zachu b'schar she'amar Avraham michut v'yatz roichnal ki disa b'sugya. V'kan we're talking about the talis and the beged, which are also a chelik of the chefza shel mitzvah. Like Rashi says, "Lekach zachu banav." Rashi says in Noach, "L'talis shel tzitzis." And there is zoicha mida keneged mida, because the pasuk says vayikach Shem and Japheth says hasimla. So in the merit of taking the Simla, the descendants of Sheim were Zoichet to the Beged. In the merit that Avraham said, Ve'imichut, then his descendants were Zoichet to the strings. Says of Shem Schechter, this would answer another bamba of a kasha. You know what a bamba is? A bamba is a bomb. A bomb of a kasha. You ready? This is the question of the Levush. The Levush asks, if in the merit of what Sheim did, he was Zoichet to something. Let's go in the world of the Mizrahi for a moment. In the merit of what Sheim did, his descendants were Zoichet to the white strings. And in the merit of what Avraham did, his descendants were Zoichet to the blue strings. So all Semites in the world, all Christians and all Muslims, they should be wearing tzitzis. All descendants of Sheim should wear tzitzis. And only Jews should wear tchelas. Ask the Levush, if in the merit of what Sheim did, we're Zoichet to the Lavan, and the merit of what Avraham did, we're Zoichet to the tchelas, all the descendants of Sheim should be wearing the white strings, and only Jews should be distinguished with the blue strings. But that's only a kash in the world of the Mizrahi. Because in the world of the Mizrahi, in the merit of what Sheim did, we were Zoichet to the white. And in the merit of what Avraham did, we were Zoichet to the blue. But if you say like Rav Shem Schechter, then the merit of what Sheim did, we're Zoichet to the garment. The garment is meaningless without strings. Tchilas is not ma'akev lavan. So you could be yotzei, let's say today, we wear white, we don't wear blue. Aren't you only yotzei with blue? No, you still get a mitzvah if you don't have blue. So for us, in other words, if you're going to say in the merit of Sheim, there's Zoichet to the white strings, in the merit of Aaron Zoichet to the blue, then all the descendants of Sheim should be wearing white strings, and only Jews should be wearing blue strings. But if you say in the merit of what Sheim did, there was Zoichet only to a garment without strings is completely meaningless. So that would answer the question of the Levush, why don't all the descendants of Sheim have some aspect of the mitzvah? The answer is because the aspect of the mitzvah that they're Zoichet to is a meaningless aspect because they were only Zoichet to the garment. Okay? So Parshas Noach and Lech Lecha segue us into the subject of Tzitzis. And that's what we'll do a little bit. Okay? A few minutes, Hilchos Tzitzis. Okay. Ready?